Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid is a person, the name I have known a lot longer than I have known him. But I came to this country in '87 as a student, and I think it was about 1988, not too long after I came, that I started reading Abdul Malik Mujahid. Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid does this, and then slowly Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid got associated with sound vision. All through my years in California, I kept reading about him, along with other people. I also heard about Howard Zinn when I was there. But when I came here, I was fortunate enough to meet Brother Anwar Kazmi, who actually introduced me to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid has founded Sound Vision. He has his religious training, and he was saying that he's got a few degrees in religious training from Pakistan. But beyond that, he has a PhD in political science from the second best university in the world after Aligarh Muslim University. That's the University of Chicago. I'm not going to take up too much time. Everybody knows him, Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid.
I'll be reading the translation for the verses that have been read. In the name of God, the most merciful and mercy-giving. O you who believe, celebrate the praises of God and do this often, and glorify Him morning and evening. It is God who sends blessings on you, as do His angels, that He may bring you out from utter darkness into the light. And
Islamic Council of New England. At this time, he heads the Civil Rights Committee of the Council, and he has been instrumental in building the many, many relationships that the Islamic Council of New England has with various maintenance agencies, including the Attorney General's office, as well as state agencies, as well as federal agencies. Brother Hussain Dai.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of Sound Vision, who are really our visitors, to the New England state, to this function which they are actually hosting. We think it's a great, honor, to have someone like Imam Malik and Professor Esposito, come and visit the state. For those of you who don't know a lot about the Islamic Council of New England, I'd just like to say a few things about the council. The mission of the council is to facilitate communication, coordination, and collaboration among the different centers and foster consensus for unified Muslim voice in the region on important issues that may affect Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So the council is really sort of an umbrella organization where we want to collect our voices and represent those voices on behalf of the many centers we have in the whole of New England region. Because every center has its own local issues, they have their own board, they attend to local matters that affect that center. But there are things that are beyond that, they transcend all the centers. And we need a voice that can collect all that and represent that on behalf of Muslims on issues that are of importance to us.
To say a little bit about them, Radio Islam is a daily running radio show in Chicago that started right here in Boston. We were one of the cities that they came to for funding this program all the way back, probably 2005 or 2005 time frame, if I remember correctly. The Muslim festival that we had here, the New England Muslim Festival that we had last year, was actually an initiative of Imam Mujahid. He's the one that encouraged us very strongly to do something here locally. So although we did not call it Muslim Fest because that has a certain level that we have to meet in excellence, and we were afraid that we were not going to meet that excellence that they wanted, We instead called it the New Indian Muslim Festival. I have some of those organizers with me here, and it was the most wonderful experience working with this group of people to put together that festival. But I'm talking too much. The time now is for me to call upon Sister Asima Silva. She also runs a radio show, or I think it's a once-a-week radio program, but she has been rising in that effort, inshallah. And along with that, she runs an organization called Enjoying Good, which encourages other people to do exactly that, enjoying in good. Beyond that, she is also an engineer, I believe, at IBM Corporation, and I read her bio online, and that's about all that I know of her. Sister Asima Silva.
I was asked to talk about the perception of local Muslims in media, and one op-ed that I found when I was researching for this is, I think this explains the idea of Muslims, what they perceive, how they are viewed in local media. And the title of this particular op-ed, I think, summarizes our impressions, right? We have this impression that media is simply not interested in Muslim stories. And a lot of people feel this way. And when I looked at this and looked at the topic, I thought to myself, I'm not going to share topics and articles that we all have seen and with negativity of Muslims and negative Muslim stories. I'm going to take a different look at it, a different perspective. So what I'm going to talk about today is, if you can keep in mind, if you saw these stories, what would you think? If you were non-Muslim, how would you perceive Muslims? And that's, I think, how I would like you to start viewing some of these articles that I'm going to share with you. And before I move on, I want to share with you that one thing I learned from Hamza Yusuf when he came to Connecticut to do a lecture was, he said, morals lie in verbs and adverbs, not in nouns and adjectives, which is exactly what we believe in, right? We don't judge people on what they look like, what they wear, what language they speak, or what ethnicity they come from. We judge people on their actions. But unfortunately, human nature is, we do judge people on the nouns and adverbs, and we judge people on all the words. And that's what I'm going to ask you to pay attention to, is all the words that you see in these articles. So for example, I found this local particular article, and it was titled "The Real Muslim Moderates," from the Boston Globe. And when you read that title, it doesn't sound too negative.
So he had a program, and I talked a little bit about a Burma alert that was going on at the time. And Afnan later came to me and said, "Did you just say Burma? I've had a lot of issues with Burma when I was doing things." So tonight, he's going to talk to us for a few minutes about the issues that he faced while researching a project related to Muslims. Afnan Qureshi.
All right, so my history class, we just finished a year-long project. We chose a country, and that was having a humanitarian issue. So I chose Burma. It was on the list, and I'd never heard anything about Burma or what was going on there. And partly that was due to what we're focusing on tonight, the whole outlook media to do with Muslims. So the perception of Muslims, the public view of Muslims, and Muslims in the media. So when I first started doing research on Rohingyas, it was hard to find something that put them in a good sort of light. Most of the things I found were government publications from Burma, Myanmar, today. And most of them focused and called the
الحمد لله الذي كفى والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المصطفى وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا. John has always been kind enough, and my senior Anwar Kazmi Bhai has forever been kind enough. except that lately he doesn't serve me any mango ice cream. That's the only complaint I have. So thank you so much for all Khalid Saab and everyone who has come here. Now this is not my presentation. It is something going around. Let me see if I can find my presentation. God says that, O believers, be mindful of God, and each one of you must consider, what have you done for tomorrow? What are you doing for future? Adopt taqwa. Indeed, he is fully aware of each and everything what you do. So this presentation is about the future, and inshallah, a successful future. It will have few elements of the presentation since Sound Vision hasn't come here for last 4 years. A bit of the introduction and what we plan to do, and then requesting you to continue to support what we are doing. Whole lot of people don't know Sound Vision, but they know Adam's World. And this dude used to live in my closet until my wife found a way of throwing him and me out of her house to some other place. So Adam's World has been a hallmark, but Sound Vision has been pioneer in Islamic songs in the English language. It has been pioneer in introducing Muslim comments. Some people, networking time in Muslim community is very important. They're all professionals, don't find much time. So networking is, a very important opportunity. So if we can get everyone in. Professor John Esposito, as I mentioned, I really believe that no one in America has written as many books. Jazakallah khair, Imam. Has written as many books to share with America about 1.5 billion people and their beliefs than what John Esposito has done. He was doing something very different.
So that's reinforcement. At this point in the evening, I'm going to try to be, I am going to be brief because we do have to have dinner, and I want to apologize ahead of time. I'll be there for dinner, but I won't be able to stay as long as I'd like to because tomorrow we have a deadline. My new book is called What Everyone Needs to Know About Sharia, which Oxford is going to publish, and I've got to get the manuscript. We're dedicated to Newt Gingrich. Now we can add President Trump, Michelle Bachmann, and Rick Santorum. Let me try to put in perspective, very, very briefly, what's happening today, but also the context in which it's occurring. And I'm going to talk very much about the media here, very, very briefly. Because I think many of you would probably say, oh, I agree, the media is a problem. Well, you don't realize just how much of a problem it is. So I'll just give you an example. There's a group called Media Tenor, T-E-N-O-R, and you can get them on the internet. They are based in Europe. They study, they monitor every day major European and American media. Okay. They monitor every day major European and American media. Okay? And he has 100 or 200 people who do this every day, looking at all the media. So they did a study between 2001 and 2011. They looked at 975,000 pieces of media in Europe and America, 975,000 pieces, and said, where in there do we find Muslims and Islam? 2001, and what kind of portrayal? 2001, in all that media, 2% is devoted to Muslims, 2% emphasizing extremism, 0.1% the vast majority of Muslims, mainstream Islam, etc. 2011, the 2% goes to 25%. Mainstream Muslims remains 0.1%. So that's an incredible gap in that period of time, okay? And the whole point here is that things actually have gotten much worse. It wasn't that bad for the first year or two after 9/11. And in fact, we find what usually triggers it in terms of in the US, I'm not talking about Europe here, presidential elections, one of the major things. Okay. He did a study in 2015, came out with a study, doing another study, looking at media. And I won't go into it other than to say, of this vast amount of media, you could look at the numbers of the amount of media that they monitored. If they looked at just the US, the UK, and Germany, US, UK, and Germany, 80% of the media coverage was very negative, okay? 80%. And if you looked at coverage of mainstream Muslims, still a little over 50% was negative. And you can see why that would be the case. You're not interviewing terrorists, you're going out and going into a main Muslim, let's say the community, but you only look at certain aspects of that community. And you bring out, quote, the problems within the community. In terms of focusing on individuals, not very much at all coverage, but when it was, primarily warlords and terrorists. The other day I did a program with him at the UN, and he had this chart, he looked at, compared the last 16 years, and I won't go into that data, but one of the cute little things that came up on the chart was the following. And looking at the last 3 years of Fox coverage, Fox manages to be 100% negative. 100. As somebody said to me, well, you probably expected 95%, but no, they hit a 100%. Okay? That's the context in which we're dealing with things. And you have to remember that whatever we say here, whatever we know about each other, that doesn't count outside. What counts outside is how people see and engage Muslims. And one of the things we know from the Gallup poll, and even polls more recently, that a significant number of Americans will still say that they don't know a Muslim in any way. You know, they may have run across somebody in a store or something, okay? So for many people, life, the portrayal of Muslims, who Muslims are, as for many of us, our reality, just in general, is very much locked into either mass media or social media. And in the last 10 years, social media has outpaced mass media. In the old days, mass media would have the story, the big interview, you know, on Fox, etc. And then it would go to social media. Now it's just the reverse. Just the reverse. When we had a program that we were doing in Dallas, you know, I mean, you know, in fact, what you find out is that it's Pamela Geller using social media. This is the same person who was one of the two primary movers against the building of the mosque at Ground Zero, who came in from outside. She's also the one that took out ads in buses that are very negative, etc., etc. She mobilized her people and called on her people across the country. They had several hundred people outside to show up. We had SWAT team, we had FBI, we had helicopters, we had personal security. I should tell you just very briefly that Siraj Wahaj and I know each other quite well, and there were 5 people that were identified that were going to speak there, but 2 that she targeted, which was Siraj and myself. But what happened was when we went to dinner, I'm sitting next to Siraj, so we're sitting there listening, and I put my hand on his arm. And before we had come, somebody had said to one of the young bodyguards, we had bodyguards, would you go up and get the vest for Imam Siraj? So I thought, like my wife, and it's true, I carry a vest wherever I go, it's cold, etc. So I had my hand on it, and I suddenly noticed there's this crusty thing, and I suddenly said, oh my God, you're wearing a bulletproof vest. At which I looked at him and said, why am I sitting next to him rather than behind him? I don't have a bulletproof vest. So the Muslim gets the bulletproof vest. We only have one. We give it to Siraj. But the point here is that you really need to realize that this is the force of the media remains as strong as it ever was, as strong as it ever was. And it's compounded now because we have both on mass media every day and on Twitter, you know who, okay? And what's interesting about this is that if you look, for example, at the New York Times, almost every day, the Times, and you'll see this in other media, will have 2 to 3 to 4 articles. Now, they may be nice if you happen to take a certain position, in that they're showing more and more of an expose. You know, let's look at the first 100 days, what have they done, etc. But look at how dominant that image still is in the media. And why does President Trump feel a need to tweet and to be against the media? Because he sees so much of the media. In fact, he said the only media that's good is Fox media. The only media that doesn't give you fake news. In that kind of situation, one has to emphasize how important it is today for the community to realize that whereas years ago we would say things are bad, they're getting worse, but they would get better, the fact is they may not get better for a long time. I've always felt that maybe I'm being too negative by warning and saying, look, another attack, whatever progress goes down the drain, another attack. Well, let me just tell you, I've been in Europe lately. I deal with places like Norway, Britain, Denmark. Now, Norway, Denmark, Sweden are great countries to move to. But increasingly not if you're a Muslim. Poland is the most incredible place. We did a conference in Vienna on Islamophobia. The Polish scholar got up and said, we have a negligible number of Muslims in the country, and we have a major Islamophobia problem. In other words, if you look at the media, if you listen to the politicians, even though they have a very, very small number of Muslims. The American scene has the potential to never have being worse. I did an interview also, it just occurred to me, with a guy in where was it, Denmark. It was supposed to be a 20-minute interview. It was 2 hours. He said to me, I've never talked to anybody for 2 hours. So he's taking notes and all this stuff. And then he said, where do you think we may go? How long will it take? The same question that I was asked at Triple IT a week before that. And I felt at Triple IT with many of my old friends, I didn't want to sound too negative. So I said, well, maybe 10 years, but it could be 20. I'm talking to the guy in Denmark, and he says to me, we just did a poll here. And in fact, he said, I think it could be 30 years in Denmark. In other words, things are deteriorating so fast. The rise of the right, you look at the elections, you know, the Netherlands, France, etc. And it really, even if the party doesn't win, if it comes in second, it's a heck of a strong party with influence within that country. Now you just quickly move to our own country, and we have a completely Republican-dominated Congress. We have a president who's a Republican, and this is not against Republicans, because the great thing about Republicans is that they're so damn divided. That's what makes it healthy. Because if they were united, you'd have to worry if they all were Tea Party, and if they all were the freedom people. But the whole point is, we have a situation where we do know when you see polls, and here I have to say it, as compared to the Democrats, and I'm not trying to do it as a comparison, the fact is the percentages of Republicans that are negative about Islam are considerable. It's also true that the percentage of Catholics that are negative is considerable. Why? And I know some of you are Republican, because for years I've said to my people, sure, as soon as Italians get money, they'll be Republican and there'll be a problem. But I don't want to go down that street. As when Samuel Arion stood behind the election of the Bushes, his kids studied with me, and I said, tell your father he'll rue the day that he went there kiddingly, and what could happen. So my point is, we live at a time now when the rhetoric is escalating. It's not just a Rick Santorum who gets out in front of the TV, but if you're really smart, you say, Rick Santorum, okay, who was he? Senator from Pennsylvania, lost twice, but last night he was on CNN because they needed to have a voice. But it's not just the Rick Santorums now. It's the fact that we know, in terms of legislation that's been introduced in the Congress, it's legislation that would declare, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and by extension say the Muslim Brotherhood is like the great mother, the motherlode of all Islamic movements. And that means you go after CARE, ISNA, impact. They've done a similar thing in Britain, and I've been involved in both situations with the legislation there as well as here. And that's the fallout. And that moved through fairly quickly through the Congress to begin to act on it this year. When they did it last year, the way, I didn't intend to give this as part of my speech, and I want to be brief tonight, so I'm not going to go on about it, but just to show you how shocking this can be. When they addressed this last year, I was called by the Democratic minority and asked if I would write up a kind of paper for them, okay? And then they had the hearing. I was on a plane, ready to leave, and they delayed the plane for 10 minutes. I get a phone call from the fellow in Congress, and he says, get on, you can see it live. So I get on my iPhone, this is what I see. When you have a congressional hearing, you have experts from the government, and you have academic experts, terrorism experts, okay? None of them were there. The way the session went was, the chair got up and introduced the issue in a biased way, and if I remember correctly, the chair was from Florida, okay? And then he had somebody in Congress introduce the conversation. That discussion of why the Brotherhood should be declared terrorist included things like, we don't want to go against our good friend and ally, General Sisi, who, of course, President Trump, sadly, also referred to that way, Sisi, who was responsible for the coup. So he gives this long speech, right? Then he goes to the Democrat. The Democrat says, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that usually when we have these hearings, we have people from the State Department, etc., and we have academic experts. Part of the reason he said it is because he knew that the State Department and others would say they don't agree with this, okay? So he points out, in other words, it's a major procedural problem. The idea should be we need to have a proper hearing and bring experts in. Instead, what was the chair's response? He called for a vote. And the Republican members voted that their way, and they have the dominant Democrats, and then he ended the meeting. So the meeting was over in, it seemed like 5 to 10 minutes. And the issues come up again. But the issues now emerge even more closely. We live in a climate, I've always said, we live in a climate where in the media, TV or mass media, you can say things about Islam and Muslims that if you see it and you just substitute the word Jew, Italian, Catholic, it would never be carried, okay? Now, it's blatantly obvious. You have a presidential election in which presidential candidates say that they wouldn't trust a Muslim to be in their cabinet, and if the person were going to be, they'd ask him either to give up his faith, or to denounce Sharia. You have a presidential candidate, Newt Gingrich, who years ago began to warn about Sharia taking over the federal government of the country when there have been no Muslims calling for Sharia, and when in fact Sharia doesn't mean what Newt is saying. And in a more recent statement, he basically said that people should be called in and asked if they follow Sharia, and if so, deported. Okay. You had not only the candidates, but you had the most successful presidential candidates say, Islam hates us. This is important. Islam hates us. How do you get out of that? Well, the way you get out of it is if you buy into the position that has been taken in public by people who are talented a number of them, who are talented in his cabinet, okay? But however talented, when it comes to talking about Islam and Muslims, on the record, you have the Secretary of State, he said this before, not while Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the Director of the CIA, Sessions, the head of the Justice Department. However different they are, they all have publicly said in the past that Islam is not a religion. Islam is not a religion. We've never said that about any other religion. Islam is not a religion. It's a political ideology, and a dangerous political ideology, and therefore it needs to be combated, okay? Mr. Bannon, who's a senior advisor, says all of that and goes beyond it. He believes that there will be, and there almost is needed for a cleansing, a war between the Judeo-Christian tradition, as it were, and Islam. Okay? That's the climate we're in. It's not a matter that, Esposito's up there and he's talking about media. Or Esposito's saying there's a problem, but thank God I'm under the radar. I got a good job, I've never been stopped at the airport. At this point in time, that's a fairly stupid thing to say. Because given the stuff that some people want to talk about, whether it's the visa issue, whether it's a registry, etc., the risk is this could happen. And at other times you might say, well, that's simply an individual congressperson that says it. But now we have rhetoric coming from the president, We have similar positions being held in differing ways by cabinet members, and we have a Republican-dominated Congress, a significant number of whom come out of a kind of Tea Party, freedom background, etc., who also take this hardline position. That's why it's important today. And that's why the kind of fundraising that occurred tonight is so important. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough, and I'm going to be blunt and I'm going to be insulting. If you don't take care of yourself, tough shit. Don't expect other people to stand up. I've used all kinds of words since I've lectured. I've never used that one. My wife always says to me, why do you say some of the things that you say? You know, but that's a reality. If the community doesn't step up, that's the thing that American Jews learned, American Italians, etc. You know, when you're on the periphery of the society, you just need to get by, you need to have a job. But when you wind up with a considerable number of members of the community, okay, that are positioned professionally and financially, and you don't really step, and stepping up here means what makes the world turn. What makes the world turn is money to lobby, to have influence on the media, etc. Once the community is out there, it makes it more and more visible. And in many ways, that's happening in other ways, where you open up your mosques, etc. That's important, but there's nothing more important than getting the message out into the media. And I think that's a real challenge. And having a Muslim community that's united, you can't just have problems with mosques all over the country and their separate stories and separate responses. You have to start uniting behind the kind of idea that Malik has and other similar ideas, okay, where it's a more united thing, so that when there's a problem, you know you're going to get somebody. The problem we have in Washington is that when the crisis comes, then you got to decide, well, who's the right lawyer to get? What's the right PR firm to get? You need an instantaneous response. You know, somebody says something that's anti-Semitic or anti-Catholic, there is an immediate response. Rather than often, you know, when it's something that's anti-Muslim, it goes different ways. The competition between major Muslim groups has gotten a little bit less, but it's got to be even less. There's got to be much more, you know, unity in that. The work of mosques in areas, you know, cities, etc., has to become much more, yes, each mosque is its own mosque, but also coming together regularly. I did a fundraiser about a year or two ago. I couldn't believe it. I realized Muslims had really arrived. Okay? They dummied down. Kid picks me up, he's driving to it, he said, we're going to have a good turnout, but I'm really sorry. We started several weeks ago calling some of the imams at mosques, but they said, you know, really, we have our next 3 weeks or 4 weeks of programming, and we won't be able to fit it in. That's exactly the way Catholics and Protestant pastors I know would talk. You know, what it really is I got my own mosque or my church, and I really, you know, I don't want other people coming in. I don't want other people raising funds for my people. It takes away from what we're doing. Building mosques is important. But the mosques, if they exist and the rug gets pulled out from underneath the community, there's a problem. And, you know, I don't think we're going to get to it, but the way people are talking, it would be conceivable to begin to talk about monitoring all mosques, shutting down some mosques. That's what they say in the UK. You know, Geert Wilders talks about shutting down mosques, you know, etc. As they're doing now with our xenophobia with regard to Mexicans, etc. You know, let's call people in, look at their background, let's look at when they applied, so that even people who innocently come in and don't, you know, check off all the boxes can suddenly discover that missing a box 20 years ago now becomes a reason for a problem. Let me just make 2 other points, and it's sad because I prepared it. Really, I wept when I prepared this presentation, but maybe in the future you'll get to hear it. If I live that long. Okay. We are at a point, though, where it can be a great opportunity. And I copied down the phrase that you had, which if I can find it quickly. The current crisis has potential taking us and America forward. I'm not saying this because Malik said it. Okay? I'm saying it because I happen to be on the board of an incredible NGO called Search for Common Ground. They're in 35 countries, and they're unbelievably active and successful. And they had their annual fundraiser or dinner in New York. And they were talking about the changing climate, doing it carefully because they're talking, search is not simply about the Muslim community, although I should point out to you, for the first time in its history, the CEO of Search is a Muslim, a very talented Muslim, Shamil Idris. But one of the points Shamil made about, as we were looking at in terms of our political situations going down, we've got, looking at the world, I mean, the Middle East is imploding. The US and Europe, in terms of our belief in our basic principles of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, major problems there in terms of the civil liberties of Muslims, the civil liberties of immigrants, etc. So, where do we go from here? And Shamil said that he remembered, he worked on a lot of really rough African situations, like Burundi, etc. He said he remembered talking to a member of the cabinet at a time when things were at their worst. And he said what shocked him was that the guy said, you're right. He said, but this could be a turning point. And he said, what do you mean by that? He said, because sometimes things have to get to a crisis point before people wake up and realize and respond. And I'll end with this fact. I'm not even talking about your community. I think that what was amazing in the response to the Muslim ban was not how many Muslims turned out, but how many non-Muslims turned out. The fact that you had people who realized in one night, thousands of people, let alone then some of the marches that we've had, but these were people who weren't Muslim, and they were probably people, some of them, who were, for example, members of human rights organizations, Black Lives Matter, etc., who normally work in their track, just as we all do, but who suddenly realized, oh my God, given the way the country's going, we're all have to be in on this. That's why the ACLU and others are so concerned. When you look at the xenophobia and the attitude then towards Muslims, towards the anti-Semitism, etc., you suddenly realize that that kind of mentality, that kind of white, super right-wing, anti-government, mentality, which, by the way, the FBI identified in its last report that the major threat to terrorism was from white anti-government groups. And for the last 3 years, the Southern Poverty Law Center has said that. Southern Poverty Law Center has said, in effect, that I think the number of groups have doubled to almost a couple of thousand. Okay? It also, I think, if I remember correctly, has noted that I think it was post the election, the number of anti-Muslim groups has tripled in America. Okay? And in that kind of environment, it becomes important that we are involved. And I leave with a line that I used years ago at the University of Chicago. I did a Ramadan talk, and it was an incredible storm. There were issues about the airport, and yet we had a packed audience. And I knew ahead of time. I welcomed the right wing. In fact, I think I may have actually welcomed Daniel Pipes' representatives, knowing that there must be somebody in the audience. And so I was glad they were there because I knew the next day I'd be on the internet. So I knew they were monitoring everything that I said. But one of the things I said to the community was, when you get a chance when you have a talk, and you can feel that the community is all there. They're not talking to each other, they're not looking at their iPad or their iPhone, etc. So I really felt the audience is there among themselves, and I've got this connection with the audience at this point. So you're moving to the end, and so you bring the audience to the top point, okay? And everything looks great. And then I pull the rug out a bit and say, and I mean this quite literally, and I say this to you, if you wake up 3 or 4 weeks from now, and you wake up and you say to yourself, thank God I'm in America, and thank God that I've got a good job, and my kids are okay, and I don't have any really sort of, great problem. There may be these issues with the community, but thank God that's... If you say that, and if you say that you haven't done a damn thing different in the weeks and months that go by, when it's a crisis, it means you have to be doing your job, but be aware 24/7. And it means that you find the time to get involved. You don't just say, well, I'm really busy and I'll leave it up to Fulan to do it. Okay? You've got to be willing to get out there. Because if you're not, it means that in a crisis situation, you're not responding. I happened to be sitting with 2 Muslims recently, good friends of mine. And they're arguing about something. Back and forth, back and forth. And I basically kept saying, I started saying, the house is on fire. The house is on fire. I was in the family, and there were little kids running around. And then finally I yelled, the house is on fire. So they both looked at me. I said, if the house were on fire, you'd run out of the house. You'd respond immediately. You wouldn't be debating each other. I said, you've got a house on fire. And you're talking about the most trivial things in the world, things that might, and differences, things that might be important when everything's okay. So I wish you luck, but I hope that many of you will get in touch with other people that you know, okay, and get in line in realizing that addressing it means that we get involved in our communities the way you have and many other things, but it also means that you learn how to take out the wallet and write the check. Because in a lot of these areas, it's the money that makes it work. If you need access to some data about Islamophobia or problems or the way the portrayal of Muslims in the media, if you go to bridge.georgetown.edu, we set up a project called The Bridge, Protecting Pluralism, Ending Islamophobia. So it's bridge.georgetown.edu. For example, somebody says to you, Muslims don't denounce terrorism. You go up, we got a whole list. Muslims are doing X, we got a whole list. I see that there have been these statements made. There are a number of people, for example, who've just been appointed to be advisors on Islam, and I read an article by the president, or to the president, and I've read some articles in the newspapers. I wonder what this guy Gorkat's really like. We have fact sheets on all the players, so that if you're going to talk to somebody, or you're in a community, or you give a little talk, you actually have facts. You can just, because that's what impresses people. If you can give them facts about something, you can't just say somebody's bad, he said some nasty things about Muslims. You have to have facts. Statistics, for example, on Muslims. What do Muslims really think? What do they really want? You know, how do they feel about jihad? How do they feel about family? How do they feel about America? The kinds of things that we have in our book, Who Speaks for Islam? That was all Gallup data. If you go to bridge.georgetown.edu, and the amazing thing about this is because of a talented staff, in the short time that the Bridge has existed, we have 1.2 million people following us. 1.2 million. And in one stat, we're actually ahead of Pamela Gallup. How long that will last, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is, if we can do it, we need ripple responses in a variety of different ways across the country. Otherwise, sad to say, things will get worse before they get better. Thank you.